Stoicism holds that human nature is fleeting, changing, unpredictable, decaying, and uncertain. How do we navigate this kind of existence? In the text, we read Marcus ask and answer, quote, "What can guide us? Only philosophy," end quote. But how does philosophy guide us? In Stoicism, the role of philosophy is to help us think and live according to the disciplines, seeing things for what they are, thinking through and taking responsibility for our choices and actions, and monitoring our reactions, continually reminding ourselves that nothing can harm us unless we let it. This is a rather different image of philosophy than we see in much of our contemporary portrayal of what philosophy does, what it's good for, and what it means to do it. Professional philosophers, for the most part, not thinking about philosophy in this ancient way. They are teaching philosophy like I am. Hello! And they are researching, which can mean a lot of different things, but what it tends to mean is reading a bunch of books and articles and then writing a bunch of pages on those articles and books or on ideas related to those articles. And then sometimes that new person's work makes it into a college class. Neat! But mostly it's read by a relatively small group of scholars interested in the same academic questions and topics. It is very rarely known to the broader public or even to folks outside their field of research, right? So that's kind of what professional philosophy in the 21st century looks like. But why do I say this? Well, because the history of ethics is wrapped up in the history of philosophy. And when philosophy really started going, sort of in our ancient Greek and ancient China primarily, philosophy was not a career and it wasn't useless. Right? It wasn't just a job and it wasn't just a waste of time. But rather, folks would do philosophy in order to decide how to live. Hayes says it well in the intro to Marcus's Meditations. He says, quote, "Ancient philosophy certainly had its academic side. Athens and other large cities had publicly financed chairs of philosophy, and professional philosophers taught, wrote, argued, as they do today. But philosophy also had a moral, practical, a moral, practical dimension. It was not merely a subject to write or argue about, but one that was expected to provide a design for living, a set of rules to live one's life by. This was a need not met by ancient religion, which privileged ritual over doctrine and provided little in the way of moral and ethical guidelines. Nor did anyone expect it to. That was what philosophy was for." End quote. Now, I want us to look at a passage from Book 2 that demonstrates the three disciplines. In Book 2, Entry 1, Marcus writes, quote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Now, notice, here's the Stoicism part. They do it because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. None of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness. End quote. This last idea, right? No one can implicate me in ugliness. This is the heart of what Marcus means when he speaks of others not being able to harm you. Of course, others can cause physical harm to you, or destroy your reputation, bring you to financial ruin, cause you trauma, but you, yourself or soul, can remain steadfast through it. No matter the harm, you maintain the power to overcome it, because ultimately, you are in charge of who you are. We didn't address the Stoic philosophy of death, but I'll say briefly that for Marcus, death is not a harm. And this is why someone taking your life or killing you isn't any different than these other sort of these other experiences in terms of, destroying your reputation or causing you some kind of physical trauma or emotional trauma. Someone killing you fits in with all of those other kinds of experiences because death is not a harm. To die is not an evil. Rather, death is a natural part of the universe and an inevitable part of human nature. There is no difference between dying now or dying later, not for the soul. So in summary then, the Logos demands that I live according to what is real and accept that only I can harm myself because I am only harmed by my own actions and ignorance. Now, a word of caution here at the end. If you find Stoicism interesting, you should know that there is, unfortunately, much distortion of Stoicism online, warping Stoicism or co-opting it to justify predominantly a kind of toxic masculinity and white supremacy. Stoic thinkers, while historically misogynist, were nonetheless proponents of equality among genders, at least in terms of intellectual potential. Many Stoics acknowledged the equal intellectual aptitude of men and women in their writings, even if culturally and historically men and women were very much not equal at the time that Stoicism was prevalent. If you're interested in Stoicism, I am happy to direct your reading and your attention to sort of good, high quality interpretations of Stoic philosophy or discuss what you find online if it's concerning. Okay, on to the reflection questions. It's time to reflect on Stoic philosophy and ethics. Give yourself 10 to 15 minutes to respond to the following questions, and then upload your responses to the journal for May 6th. 1. If you were going to articulate a system of values for yourself, what are some of the key ideas you'd place at its center? In other words, when you think about becoming the best version of yourself you can be, where do you begin? 2. What do you think of the Stoic idea that no one and nothing can truly harm you except yourself? How does this jive with your understanding of contemporary psychology or your lived experience?